The night begins not with silence, but with the low crackle of fire as it exhales through soot-stained stone. In a chamber where shadows bend across rough tapestries, the last ember glows red against blackened wood, and smoke curls upward like the ghost of forgotten prayers. Beyond these walls, frost hardens across cobbled paths, and the thin air carries the faraway toll of iron bells marking the hour that divides the night. It is here, in this half-lit stillness, that the first sleep ends. They rise from their straw-stuffed pallets not because the day has come, but because the body itself remembers. This was once the rhythm of all humankind, the bifurcated night, broken into two sacred intervals of slumber. In that interlude, when dreams gave way to a peculiar clarity, men and women stirred as though summoned by something older than hunger, older even than faith. They woke to the sound of their own breath mingling with the chill that pressed against their lips, to the scent of tallow candles guttering in the dark. Some prayed. Some whispered their confessions to no priest but the shadows. Some reached for the warmth of another, hands trembling in the cold. The chamber, with its worm-eaten beams and sagging drapery, seemed to expand in those hours. The silence was not empty. It was laden with centuries of memory. Mothers leaned over their children, soothing them from dreams of wolves and demons, whispering lullabies learned from their own mothers before them. Fathers, weary from fields frozen in winter's hold, sat on wooden stools, staring into embers as if the fire might answer unspoken questions. Candles flickered, their smoke bitter with beeswax, and the wooden crucifix nailed to the wall seemed to waver in the unsteady light. Outside, the village breathed in rhythm with them. Dogs barked once and fell silent. The river whispered beneath its crust of ice. And within that pause between sleeps, the heart of the Middle Ages beat in a way we have almost forgotten. Slow, reflective, yearning. For the noble, the interlude brought prayer. Within the stone chambers of monasteries, monks stirred at midnight as though awakened by the hand of God. Their sandals scuffed across damp floors as they gathered for matins, chanting Latin psalms into the cold vaults, their voices rising like smoke toward rafters where bats shifted restlessly. Each note carried a weight of penance, of vigilance, of endless devotion. And when their voices fell silent, the echo lingered, a reminder that time itself was measured not by hours, but by duty. For peasants, the pause between sleeps was no less sacred, though woven in different cloth. They tended to fires, stirred pots of broth left simmering in clay vessels, checked on livestock shivering in wooden pens. In those hours, men and women might speak in hushed tones, not of scripture, but of weather, debts, harvests, and dreams. Some pressed their hopes into whispered bargains with the night, for good fortune, for protection, for relief from hunger. Others, restless, walked out beneath the stars, their cloaks gathering frost, their breath hanging white in the air. To look at the heavens in that interlude was to believe, if only briefly, that answers might be written in constellations. And yet, beneath these humble gestures, something deeper stirred. In this broken night, humanity confronted itself. Guilt rose unbidden, secrets clawed their way into consciousness. Men remembered wrongs they had committed in daylight. Women remembered children they had lost to plague. Even the young felt the tremor of mortality in that watchful silence. It was as if the night, divided, demanded honesty, a vigil before the return to the safety of dreams. Objects became talismans in that liminal space. A rusted key, heavy in the palm, whispered of doors closed and promises broken. A wooden bowl, still sticky with porridge, held the memory of meals shared and prayers said before eating. A scrap of parchment, ink smeared by the hand of a weary scribe, carried the breath of words too sacred to speak aloud. Each item, simple and worn, glowed with a meaning heightened by the hour. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. Owls called across fields where frost clung like armor to the grass. Crows shifted on bare branches, black silhouettes against a pale moon. A horse, tethered in the dark, stamped its hooves, sending up the scent of hay and sweat. And in that tapestry of sound and silence, men and women stood between their first sleep and their second, aware of their smallness, aware of their need. The interlude was not only for prayer or fear. It was also for intimacy, for the fragile union of bodies seeking warmth. Couples reached for one another in the darkness, whispering promises, sharing breaths, sometimes conceiving new lives in that liminal span. For them, too, this broken night carried creation as well as confession. The rhythm of biphasic sleep became the rhythm of continuity, of lineage, of survival. As hours passed, the first light of dawn had not yet dared to creep across the horizon. The fire sank lower. Candles sputtered into pools of melted wax. The weight of the body grew insistent once more. And so, one by one, they returned to their pallets. Monks to their narrow cots, peasants to their straw, nobles to their feather-stuffed mattresses. They drew cloaks over their shoulders, pressed cold hands beneath rough cloth, and let the second slumber take them. This was not mere sleep, but a descent, deeper, heavier, final until morning. And thus the rhythm continued. Day divided by toil, night divided by silence and dreams. It bound them all, from lord to serf, by a pattern older than memory. It was a rhythm born of necessity, yet sanctified by ritual, by fear, by longing. To awaken in the night was to meet the self stripped bare, to encounter the divine, to carry the weight of human frailty in solitude. What we call now an uninterrupted 8 hours was then unthinkable. Their lives were woven into pauses and returns, into the tides of consciousness that mirrored the tides of nature. This forgotten rhythm shaped not only their nights, but their days. For what was confessed in darkness influenced what was spoken at dawn, and what was promised in whispers between sleeps guided what was done under the sun. As the second sleep thickened, the village fell silent again. Doors closed, hearths cooled, voices hushed, dreams deepened. And in that silence, history itself was being written, not in parchment or ink, but in the collective breath of countless generations, rising and falling with the divided night. When the rooster crowed and dawn cracked open the frost-laden sky, the rhythm ended, only to begin again with the coming dusk. For them, night was never whole. It was broken, sacred, revealing. And though centuries have buried the memory, though we measure our lives now in ceaseless hours and electric light, the bones of that rhythm still live within us, waiting in silence to be remembered. And as we follow them into the second slumber, deeper and darker, we prepare to enter another story, where dreams themselves would guide visions, where prophecy and madness blurred, and where the medieval night whispered its most haunting truths. The fortress breathes in the dark like a wounded beast. Its walls, once proud, are now veined with moss, their stones damp with centuries of frost and neglect. Through narrow arrow slits, the moon's pale blade falls across the cold floor, revealing dust, discarded feathers, and the forgotten trace of iron boots. A lone candle trembles in the draught, its flame bending as though bowing to the silence. Outside, the wind scours the ramparts, carrying the cry of wolves and the distant bark of dogs. Midnight has arrived, the hour between the first sleep and the second. Within this broken keep, a lord stirs. His body is heavy, pressed down by duty, debts, and the restless shadows of war. He awakens not because he wishes to, but because something in the marrow of men has always known to rise in this hour. The bifurcated night calls him, as it once called his ancestors, to face what daylight conceals. He pulls a woolen cloak around his shoulders, its threads frayed, its edges stiff with sweat and ash. The air is raw against his throat, carrying the tang of limestone and extinguished torches. His hand closes around a key, rusted, worn smooth by the touch of generations. It hangs from a chain at his belt, cold as a reliquary, heavy as sin. He turns it in the lock, and the door groans open into a corridor haunted by silence. His steps echo, measured, hesitant, as though each one presses deeper into memory. Shadows lengthen on the stone, and the smell of stale wine drifts from the hall below. Somewhere in the fortress, a scribe too has awakened, seated at a desk strewn with parchment and half-dried ink. The scratching of quill on vellum is faint, almost swallowed by the night, but the Lord hears it and feels its weight. Words are being written that may outlast him. Words that may name him guilty or blessed, tyrant or shepherd, for in this hour, truth is sharper than daylight, and ink darker than blood. The Lord kneels in the chapel, lit only by the stub of a candle that sputters and smokes. He whispers prayers, his voice brittle, uncertain, echoing against vaulted stone. The saints gaze down from cracked frescoes, their eyes worn away by centuries, their hands raised in benediction or warning. He prays not for victory, but for release, from famine gnawing at his people, from the debts owed to distant kings, from the memories of men he ordered to the gallows. In the quiet, his own words seem foreign to him, as though spoken by another. Outside, the owl's cry cleaves the night. The fortress creaks in reply, timbers groaning as though alive. A hawk wheels above the battlements, talons curled, a sentinel circling endlessly above a world that sleeps in fragments. These are omens, or so he believes. The medieval night is thick with signs, a cracked bell rope, a sudden draft, a dog howling at the moon. In these, men rid their guilt, their destiny, their salvation. And the Lord is no different, staring into every flicker and echo for the message that might free him. But the silence is heavier than absolution. It presses down upon him, dragging his thoughts to places he cannot escape. He remembers the peasants driven from their land, their cries rising like smoke. He remembers the faces of soldiers who fell defending these very stones. He remembers a child's voice, his own son's, silenced by fever in a night much like this one. And the guilt settles on his shoulders, as surely as his cloak. In the corridor, the key grows warm in his palm. He thinks of doors locked to the hungry, of chambers sealed to the poor, of gates barred to those who came begging. The iron teeth of the key bite into his skin, and he feels in it a judgment greater than any court. He presses it to his lips like a relic, a bitter kiss against cold iron. The candle sputters once, its flame thinning, then steadies. He takes this as a sign, fragile, wavering, but real. Rising, he returns to his chamber. The air is colder now, the moon lower, the silence more complete. He lies again upon his pallet, cloak wrapped tight, the key clutched to his chest as though it were the only anchor between him and the abyss. Slowly, the second sleep takes him. It comes heavier than the first, blanketing his mind with dreams darker and stranger. But the memory of the vigil lingers, the taste of prayer still on his tongue, the weight of the key still pressing into his heart. This was the power of the broken night. It forced men and women to meet themselves when no one else was watching, to confess what the daylight would never allow, to fear what the morning would soon demand. For in those hours, time itself felt fragile, and the distance between life and death, between sin and salvation, narrowed to the width of a single breath. Beyond the fortress walls, dawn approaches, though it has not yet broken. The air grows colder, the fire weaker, the silence deeper, and as the Lord drifts into that second slumber, we drift with him, into the wider story of how men and women survived these broken nights. For the hour of vigil does not belong to lords alone. It belongs also to monks with their psalms, to peasants with their hearths, to soldiers at the walls. And it is their voices that will rise next, chanting and trembling in the long shadow of the medieval dark. The fortress fades into silence, its lord surrendered to the second sleep. Yet beyond its crumbling ramparts, another soul awakens. In a cloistered scriptorium, where the air is thick with wax and ink, the medieval night exhales again. A veiled candle sputters against the draft, its flame casting fractured halos across stacks of vellum. Shadows of books and crucifixes stretch across damp stone, moving like silent watchers. It is here, in this narrow cell of words and silence, that another vigil begins. The monk stirs from his first sleep with the instinct of generations. His body, wrapped in a coarse woolen habit, is heavy with cold, the straw beneath him damp from a leaking roof. He hears the faint toll of the abbey's bell, one measured strike that does not summon the day but sanctifies the interlude. Rising, his sandals scrape softly against the flagstones. Each step echoes against vaulted arches, breaking the kind of silence that seems carved from eternity. He enters the scriptorium. The smell greets him first. Candle smoke, sharp and bitter, mingling with the earthy tang of ink made from oak galls. Parchment lies open before him, its surface uneven, its letters half-formed. He lowers himself onto a bench, pulls the quill close, and dips its point into the ink. The feather trembles in his hand, a fragile thing set against the enormity of the night. The candlelight flickers across the words he copies, Latin psalms, saints' lives, fragments of sermons meant to guide a world gripped by plague, war, and famine. But in the pause between sleeps, the words feel different. They do not merely instruct, they breathe. They whisper to him of mysteries too vast for daylight, of visions that belong only to the hush of midnight. His eyes blur. He sees, in the wavering ink, faces half-dreamed. Angels carrying torches, demons gnashing their teeth, saints with bloodied palms. Were these mere imaginings or visitations born of the broken night? Outside, frost gathers upon the cloister garden. Moonlight spills through arches, painting frost-glazed herbs in silver. A blackbird cries, brittle and lonely, as if startled by something unseen. The monk shivers, pulls his habit closer and continues. His lips move, whispering each word he writes so that the act of copying becomes a prayer itself. Each syllable strikes the air like a bell, vanishing into shadows but leaving their vibration behind. The abbey itself seems alive. Beams creak. A mouse skitters across the floor, pausing to gnaw at candle drippings. From distant cells, faint coughs and mutters drift through the stone, echoes of other monks caught in the same ancient rhythm. And above them all, the bell waits, suspended in its tower, ready to strike again and usher them into chant. The monk pauses, lifts the quill, and looks at his ink-stained fingers. They are cracked from cold, stiff from years bent to this labor. He whispers a confession, not meant for ears but for the page itself, of pride felt when his work was praised, of envy harbored toward brothers whose voices soared in chant while his faltered. He bows his head, quill trembling, as if the act of writing were both a sin and its absolution. The candle gutters low, smoke rises, and for a moment he is blind. In that blindness, he feels it, the weight of centuries pressing down, the presence of the divine hovering just beyond reach. He imagines the saints leaning close, breathing into his ear. He imagines the devil watching from the shadows, smiling at his fatigue. The night does not tell him which vision is true. It demands that he live with both. When sight returns, he sets down the quill. His eyes drift to the reliquary upon the shelf, a shard of bone wrapped in silk, said to be from a martyr long forgotten. He reaches for it, fingers trembling, pressing it to his forehead. Its coolness shocks him awake. Its silence offers no answer, only the steady pulse of his own blood. The bell tolls again. Its sound reverberates through stone, deep and mournful. Other monks stir, rising from their straw, gathering in the cloister to chant the matins. The monk hesitates. For a moment he wishes to remain in the Scriptorium, alone with his words, his visions, his ghosts. But duty calls, and so he rises, carrying the candle with him down the long corridor. The chanting begins, voices rising in unison, echoing against the arches, mingling with the smoke of incense. The air trembles with devotion, with longing, with the weight of generations. The monk joins them, though his voice is softer, more fragile, as though still bound to the candle and parchment left behind. Yet in the harmony, he feels his confession dissolve into something greater than himself. And then, as the chant fades, they return once more to their cells. The monk lies again upon the damp straw, pulls the habit close and lets his eyes close. The second sleep falls heavier than the first, dragging him deep, carrying with it the scent of ink, the whisper of psalms, the fragile tremor of visions half-formed. This was the rhythm of his world, waking not once but twice, living 2 nights within one, dividing silence from silence. And in that fragile space between, souls reached beyond themselves, to saints, to visions, to fears unspoken. As he drifts away, the candle burns to nothing, leaving only smoke curling upward into the darkness. And with it rises a question, unspoken but eternal. What truths were revealed in those half-dreaming hours, and what shadows were birthed by them? The answer, perhaps, lies not in the cloister, but in the humble hearths of those who shared the same broken night beyond abbey walls. The peasants, the laborers, the forgotten. They too stirred between their sleeps, though not with ink and prayer, but with hunger, memory, and love. And it is to them that we now turn, to witness how the rhythm of night shaped even the simplest lives. The abbey's chant fades into silence, swallowed by stone and distance. Outside its cloistered walls, the village lies in shadow. The wind carries with it not psalms, but the faint smell of smoke and damp earth. In a hut of clay and thatch, where the fire has sunk into a glow of coals, a peasant stirs from his first sleep. The night is not finished with him. It beckons him into the same ancient rhythm, one the monks sanctify with prayer, but which he greets with silence, hunger, and memory. The room is small, its air thick with the mingled scents of straw, sweat, and yesterday's stew. A clay hearth crouches in the corner, faintly alive, breathing out the last warmth of day. Smoke clings to the rafters, leaving the ceiling blackened and scarred. The peasant wakes on a bed of reeds softened by furs, the damp straw scratching his skin. His body is sore from the fields, his hands cracked from the bite of tools, his back bent by seasons of toil. Yet in this strange hour, when darkness is deep and the world holds its breath, he feels an awareness sharper than daylight. He rises, cloak draped over his shoulders, and moves to the hearth. The ashes are gray and cold, but beneath them a single ember glows like the eye of some patient creature. He prods it with an iron poker, coaxing sparks, breathing life into it. The air tastes of soot, bitter against his tongue. Slowly, flames lick upward, casting a fragile halo against the mud-plastered walls. The flicker illuminates the rough wooden bowls stacked on a shelf, the iron pot still crusted with barley, the crude bench smoothed by years of weary bodies. Every object is humble, but in this half-night they seem to breathe with meaning. He listens. Beyond the hut, the bleating of sheep drifts faintly through the dark, their cries softened by frost. A rooster, confused by moonlight, stirs but does not crow. Somewhere in the forest beyond, wolves move, the crack of a branch, the distant chorus of howls rising like a hymn. His wife lies sleeping still, her face pale in the dim glow, hair tangled across the furs. Beside her, the child stirs, murmuring in dreams. The peasant watches them, heart aching with tenderness and dread. He knows how thin the veil is between sleep and death, how fever or hunger can steal a life without warning. In this interlude, he reflects. He thinks of the harvest past, too meager, too taxed by the Lord's collectors. He thinks of debts, of the coming frost that will strip the earth bare. He remembers the laughter of his daughter at dawn, braids swinging as she fetched water, her small hands red from the chill. That memory lingers like warmth against the night's cold, a flicker of light within him. But it carries with it a shadow, the fear that one day even laughter will fall silent under the weight of famine. He kneels by the hearth, feeding the flame with a splinter of wood, watching the smoke curl upward like a prayer unspoken. In the silence he whispers, not to saints, but to the night itself. He asks for strength, for mercy, for another spring. His words are simple, barely more than breath, but they are sacred in their own way. For him, survival is devotion. Endurance is faith. The hut creaks in the wind. The thatch rustles as if alive. The peasant pulls his cloak tighter and steps outside. The frost bites his face, sharp and metallic. His boots crunch over frozen soil. He looks upward to the stars blazing against the void. To him, they are not constellations with names, but lanterns lit by unseen hands. He wonders if the dead walk among them. He wonders if his child's future is written there. The breath he exhales drifts upward like smoke, merging with the heavens, carrying his fears with it. He lingers until the cold presses into his bones, then returns inside. His wife stirs as he lies again beside her, murmuring his name. He touches her hand, roughened by labor, and holds it until her breathing steadies. The child whimpers once, then sighs into deeper sleep. The fire cracks softly, casting shadows that move like dancers along the walls. Slowly, the weight of the second sleep begins to settle upon him. His eyelids grow heavy, his breath deepens, his body surrenders. Yet the thoughts of that quiet interlude remain, debts and hunger, love and fear, the fragile hope of another dawn. He drifts into slumber with the ember of memory glowing in his chest, as real as the ember still pulsing in the hearth. This was how peasants lived their nights, not with chants or parchment, but with fire, silence, and the constant reckoning with survival. Their vigil was not adorned with Latin psalms, but it was no less holy. For in that broken night, they too confessed, prayed, and remembered, though in words the world would never record. And as they slept again, as the village settled into the heavier second slumber, the rhythm united lord and serf, monk and peasant alike, divided nights, yet shared humanity. In these fragments of darkness, history itself breathed, in the hush of cloisters, in the echo of ramparts, in the smoke of clay hearths. When dawn finally comes, it will reveal fields brittle with frost, markets waiting for trade, bells calling the faithful. But before light pierces the horizon, the night has one more story to tell. For not all souls slept in safety. Some kept vigil with swords at their sides, walls trembling beneath siege, hearts divided between fear and duty. Their broken nights were not of quiet prayer or hearthfire memory, but of steel, sweat, and survival. And it is to them that we turn next, to witness the soldiers who woke in darkness and carried their dread into the silence before battle. The clay hearth fades into silence, its ember glowing faintly in the dark. But beyond the huts of the village, the night trembles with another kind of fire. Across a ravaged plain, the air is sharp with smoke and iron. A fortress under siege breathes like a wounded beast, its walls streaked with soot, its towers cracked by stone and flame. Above it all, The moon cuts the sky like a blade, spilling silver across the muddy courtyard, glinting on helmets and shattered shields. Here, between the first sleep and the second, soldiers stir. The night does not offer them comfort. It presses heavy with dread. In narrow barracks, men shift uneasily on straw mats, their bodies sore, their armor close by. The air is thick, metallic, heavy with the stink of sweat and blood. One soldier wakes, chest tight, breath clouding in the cold. He listens. The silence is deceptive, for within it hides the low groan of timbers, the drip of rainwater through broken roofs, the distant murmur of drums from the enemy's camp. He pulls his cloak over his shoulders, its wool stiff with mud, and grips his sword as though it were part of him, a limb he dares not lose. The candlelight flickers against the walls, trembling with each draft. In its glow, he sees the faces of his companions, gaunt, hollow-eyed, some whispering prayers, others staring blankly, lost to exhaustion. The soldier rises, boots crunching over scattered rushes, and steps into the cold. The courtyard stretches before him, damp with rain, reeking of smoke and horses. A gallows stands in shadow, its rope swaying in the wind like a pendulum marking the hours of fear. He climbs the battlements. The stone is slick, his hands raw against its chill. From the wall, he sees the enemy's campfires, hundreds of them, burning across the plain like fallen stars. Their smoke snakes upward, mingling with mist, carrying the scent of roasting meat, of voices raised in foreign songs. He imagines their soldiers laughing, drinking, unaware of the gnawing dread that fills this fortress. The sound of a horn drifts faintly, mournful and deep. His heart clenches, his grip tightens on the hilt of his sword. In the pause between sleeps, memory invades him. He recalls his boyhood, chasing geese across fields now scorched by war. He recalls the hammering of his father's forge, sparks rising like fireflies in the night. He recalls the warmth of a woman's voice, the brush of her hand across his cheek as he left for battle. These fragments cut deeper than any blade, for they remind him of what may already be lost. The night grows colder. Breath steams in the air, mingling with torch smoke and the faint scent of tallow. The soldier kneels, pressing his forehead to the stone, whispering words he half remembers from childhood prayers. They are not eloquent. They are not meant for priest or altar. They are raw, broken pleas flung into the darkness, for protection, for forgiveness, for a dawn that will come without blood. Behind him, the fortress groans again. A tower, cracked by enemy siege engines, shifts with the weight of stone. The sound is a low thunder, reminding all who hear it that walls are not eternal. The soldier looks up. The moon is veiled by clouds, dimming the world into shadow. For a moment, he feels as though the night itself conspires against him. Yet in that darkness, faith ignites. Not the quiet faith of monks with their psalms, nor the simple faith of peasants at their hearths, but the desperate faith of men who have nothing left but steel and spirit. He rises, sword in hand, and lifts his face to the wind. The iron in his mouth tastes like blood, but his voice does not falter. He whispers a vow, not to saints or kings, but to the memory of those he loves. He will not yield. Not while breath fills his chest. The hours creep on. Torches flicker. The men of the garrison return to their pallets, settling into the heavier second sleep, some with swords still clasped in their fists. Dreams mingle with dread. Visions of fire, of walls collapsing, of families lost. Yet the rhythm persists. Even here, surrounded by enemies, the night divides itself, forcing men to confront their fear before drowning them again in slumber. The soldier lingers on the wall a moment longer. The enemy's fires burn steady, their smoke curling upward as though the earth itself exhales. An owl circles above, its wings silent, its eyes catching the faint light. The soldier watches it vanish into the void, then lowers his gaze. He descends the wall, returns to the barracks, and lies again among his companions. The second sleep comes swiftly, heavy as armor, merciless as fate, but the vigil leaves its mark. The dread carried in those hours will shape the battles to come, will echo in every clash of steel, in every cry that pierces dawn. For the broken night is not a reprieve, it is a reminder that war does not rest, that fear is never banished, only delayed, and that faith, fragile, flickering, burning, must be carried like a torch through the long dark. As he drifts into slumber, the fortress holds its breath. The air thickens with smoke. The walls tremble with the weight of unseen engines. The rope sways. The horn sounds again, distant but inevitable. And in that darkness, men dream not of peace, but of endurance. Dawn waits beyond the horizon, unseen but certain. And when it comes, it will reveal not only the cost of war, but the faith that sustained it. For even in the broken rhythm of night, even in the silence before battle, men sought meaning. In prayer, in vows, in memories that refused to die. And beyond the fortress walls, in chapels and cloisters, others too kept vigil. Their prayers rose with incense, their voices breaking the silence, their eyes fixed not on enemy fires but on eternal light. It is to them that we turn next, to witness how redemption was whispered into stone chapels, how guilt and absolution intertwined in the sacred darkness of the medieval night. The fortress exhales its smoke into the stars, and the last ember of the barracks dims. Somewhere beyond the wall of iron and oath, a door thuds shut against the wind. Then, as if the night itself knelt, a small chapel takes the darkness into its ribs and makes it breathe. The hinges cry a thin note. A figure slips inside, carrying the cold on his cloak and the taste of iron on his tongue. His boots scuff the flagstones, wet with the breath of winter. He closes the door and the world outside. Horns, ropes, the slow grind of siege, falls away like a bad dream sliding back into the forest. In the nave, the air is heavy with old incense, resin and ash braided into the stones. A candle guttering in a wall sconce throws a wavering aureole across a fresco where saints float above a city of fire. Stained glass holds the moon in fractured pieces, a lamb's eye, a shard of cobalt sky, the pale heel of a martyr. The penitent stands, shoulders bowed as if a hand, seen only by God, pressed him there. Between first sleep and second, when bodies wake because memory will not let them drown, he has come to weigh his heart. He moves forward, past pews hollowed by the kneecaps of generations, past a pillar scarred by knife prayers. Initials, dates, a cross cut with a trembling hand. The chill has fingers. It slides beneath his nails, licks the bones of his wrists. He tastes tallow, salt, a ghost of wine. He hears the chapel the way one hears seawater in a shell, a deep, patient murmur, wood contracting, wax weeping, the faint tick of cooling iron. Somewhere above, the rope of the bell sways against its beam with the quiet of a sleeping animal. He kneels among rushes and crushed lavender, the floor graffitied with the nicks of countless buckles. "I'm afraid," he tells the silence. The words are breath white in the candle's halo, not of dying, but of being known. The chapel does not answer. It opens in him instead, the way a wound opens, or a door with the same soft tear. In the space uncovered, images bloom, his wife's hands flour-dusted over the bread, the face of a child slick with fever, a field he once turned to soil with a wooden ard, his father's laugh caught in his throat like a sparrow. He had thought himself toughened by iron, by the tower's groan, by nights of broken sleep. But here, in the cleft hour, his heart is raw as bark stripped from a sapling. He rises slowly, the ache in his knees a litany. Near the chancel rail, a brass candlestick bears scars of melted wax like pale vines climbing its trunk. He takes the taper and draws flame from the wall sconce. Light trembles into being, and with it the chapel deepens. Frescoes step closer. Painted mouths part to whisper. The floor unscrolls its map of scraped pilgrim leather. He carries the flame to the altar, where linen rises in a frost of embroidery, grapes and vines, a fish whose eye never closes. A beeswax scent softens the iron cold. The vessels rest beneath a veil, chalice sleeping like a heart, paten a thin coin of sun. He does not touch them. He only looks, and looking is its own confession. In a niche to the left, a reliquary glows modestly, not with jewels, but with polish from 1,000 hands. A sliver of bone rests inside, a saint whose name he cannot read, whose story he cannot recall. Still he reaches. Fingers chapped and nicked from drill and rope, he sets his thumb to the glass. The cool pain tightens his skin, his pulse drums lightly against it. He thinks of the living bone inside him, the lattice that has carried him through fog and smoke and hunger. He thinks of the bone in the reliquary, carried through centuries by those who believed that holiness could be held, could be handed like water to the parched. He wants to believe it too. He wants to believe that sin can be weighed and measured and set down, that a word can cut it loose like a rope from a post. He wants to believe that the second sleep, when it comes, can hold him without the frantic twitch of the heart, without the drum of dread in his temples. The chapel waits. He lowers his head. "I kept the gate shut when hunger came," he says softly, as if the gate might hear from wherever gates go in the dark. "I sent 3 away with empty bowls. I did not open the storehouse. The words pool on the stones between his boots. I struck a man who would not carry a beam. I saw the fear in him, and I struck again. The candle's flame rises bows. I swore to the wall more than I swore to mercy. The confessional here is only a chair with arms polished to a dull river by many elbows. He sits. He listens for footsteps, for a priest's cough in the sacristy, for the whisper of linen and the soft clink of a key. None come. The night provides no intermediary. Only the rood above him watches, a wooden Christ, mouth parted, ribs scored, the carved veins at his wrists startling as a map of rain. The penitent studies the open hands, the wound like a small black eye. He touches his own palm, where the sword's tang has made a permanent ache. If I open, he asks, not expecting an answer, what will be taken? What will be saved? From the sacristy, a draught creeps out, cold with stone, warm with oil and wine. The smell of chrism reminds him of a day he had almost forgotten. His son's forehead glistening beneath a thumb, candlelight minted on soft hair. He remembers holding the boy afterward, the infant's weight shocking in its trust, a bundle of breath and heat. For a heartbeat, he is not in mail and cloak. He is not a watcher of walls. He is a father learning how to carry a brand new flame. The memory cuts, then stitches. He stands and walks the perimeter as if tracing a boundary only he can see. Each station is an inventory of the soul by way of objects, a cracked stope with a film of ice where holy water should be, a broom bristling like winter thistle, a missal heavy with clasps, its pages perfumed by mildew and wax. He opens the book. The Latin is a forest he wanders by sound. Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. The syllables are pebbles in the mouth, cold and exact, and by speaking them he feels his jaw unclench, his shoulders lower. He repeats the plea until it becomes a rhythm under the rhythm of his breath. Somewhere beyond the walls the wind changes. He feels it in the way the candle arcs, in the hush that follows. The bell does not ring, but its rope gives a soft fibrous sound where it rubs the beam. He imagines the tower, sky-scratched and old, keeping watch above the sleeping town. If the bell were to speak now, it would be for matins. Monks would lift their voices like a seam across the torn night. He echoes them, a single thread trying to remember where it belongs. When the taper gutters, he cups it with his palm, and his palm becomes a tiny gold cave. Wax splashes his skin, sharp, then dull. He thinks of how pain in daylight is a shout, but in this hour it is a bell too, clear and useful. He lets the drop harden, a seal no bigger than a tear. At the altar rail, he bows his head until the wood presses a crescent into his brow. If the wall fails, he whispers, let mercy not fail. If I am broken, let what falls from me be grain, not iron. Breath shudders out. He does not know if the prayer is right. He only knows it is true. And because this hour is made for thresholds, he does not leave at once. He lingers as a child lingers at a doorway after being forgiven, learning the shape of relief. The chapel receives his weight without comment. The saints do not brighten. The Christ does not bend. But something in the air loosens, as if a knot had been eased where the ribs meet. He feels the floor not as judgment, but as earth, cold, sound, willing to hold. When he opens the door, the outside rushes in. Wet straw, distant horses, the tired astonishment of stars. He does not look at the wall. He lets the night keep it a moment longer. He steps into the close, snow-scented dark and pulls his cloak about him. The cold re-enters him like a lesson. Behind him, the chapel keeps breathing, small and alive, like a fox in winter, like a heart that has decided against despair. On the path back to the barracks, his boot finds a fallen sprig of yew. Its needles are bitter, evergreen, smelling of funerals and roofs, of burial and shelter both. He tucks it inside his glove without thinking, a poor man's relic. It will bruise his wrist gently with every step, a thorned reminder that cost and comfort share the same root. By the time he reaches the threshold, the second sleep is already descending, a slow tide pulling at his bones. The barracks is a crate of breathing, thick, uneven, human. He lies with his sword near, but not touching, the distance a vow. His last sight before the darkness takes him is the rafters, sooted, webbed, carrying the weight of men and snow and the unwatched stars. As he falls, the chapel's door settles back against its jamb, and the candle learns how to be smoke. The night gathers its halves, stitches them together. In the seam, there is space enough for one more story, of dawn bells and bread, of letters written by cold hands, of a village waking to frost and to rumor. Morning will demand a different courage. But for now, mercy has been spoken in a language without witnesses, and it is enough to carry into sleep. The walls will ask their questions soon. The fields will ask theirs as well. Between them walks a man who has learned to hold a flame without letting it burn him or go out.